Thanks very much. It's great to be in this beautiful hotel. My name's Eugene Quinn. I moved to Vienna for love. I got married to an Austrian woman. How many of you, like me, were not born in Austria? Put your hands up. Okay. And how many of you, if we all work in the creative industry, how many of you are more creative in the evening than the morning? Okay, and how many of you are more creative in the morning? Interesting. Well, thanks for getting up. Yeah, my wife works for Eins, and she was saying the studios are pretty much empty till about 10:30 in the morning, and then the people work later and later. But we got a little baby, so she's there early in the morning. Yeah. So I'd like to show you a series of slides. Andrea's going to be my third finger. Thank you. One more. I work for a culture group in Vienna, Space and Place, a non-profit group, and we work beyond genre. It's quite difficult. You'll probably be more confused at the end of this talk than the beginning about what we really do in Vienna, and I'm quite happy about that we are quite unfocused in our work. My mind is extremely indisciplined, and we therefore seek out partners who might push us a little bit further. So where other people, are designers or do something quite clear, I'm not quite sure what I do. And I like it that way. We work with the Brandstätter Verlag, we work with The Guardian, we work with Kunsthalle, Magdas Hotel, Stadische Herbst, TU, VU, Hauptuni. And it starts just with having a coffee or a beer with somebody and then thinking, hey, what's the space between us that might be interesting to play in? And it's sometimes it doesn't work. I'm going to speak about some of the projects that have not worked out for us, but that's part of the fun, that you can play in that space and see what you have in common. Beyond fast, I think stories are something that we really value, and there's less and less time in the world to actually open up with your own story. And we try with various projects to get people to tell their own story. I know some of you were at our event last night, Vienna Coffee House Conversations. Vienna is not a city which jumps up and embraces you and welcomes you and says, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Tell me your story. It's a bit more, there's more angst than that. People are a bit more shy and a bit more intellectual. They don't talk to strangers for no reason like they do maybe in Italy or Ireland or the United States. So we thought, well, hang on, there's lots of interesting people in Vienna, we know that, and they'd love to make friends with people at the UN, for example. There's not so much dialogue with a lot of the international diplomats in Vienna, so we thought, why don't we set up a forum in which the Viennese can meet the UN and meet people from all around the world who are in Vienna for conferences. Remember, it's the number 2 conference city in the world. So we created Vienna Coffee House Conversations, where you sit down with a stranger from around the world or from Vienna, and for 2 hours you eat some food together and talk and create some international dialogue. So if you'd like to have dinner with somebody from China, from Saudi Arabia, from New York, please come along to the Vienna Coffee House Conversations. And we use a question menu. They say that the Viennese are not very good at small talk, but really quite good at big talk. And so our question menu means you dive straight into some really provocative questions. It seems odd to have a question menu, but it comes from an Oxford historian, Theodore Zeldin, who says that the conversations we're having in 21st century are increasingly banal. All this talk about, celebrities and sports and, Facebook fluff that comes around every day. It doesn't really matter. We also do a silly walks competition on the Maria-Hilfer-Straße for the opening day, where it became a shared zone, a great day for Vienna, the longest shared space in Europe. We built a big catwalk in front of the Pick and Kloppenburg, and we invited the Viennese to do their stupidest walks for us. And we had 3 judges, just like in a regular casting show, who gave the people. They were quite nasty, really, about all of the walks that went on. And we wanted to turn walking into an event, because I love to walk. I can't really stand still. Walking is a great way to explore the city. Next slide, please. Beyond serious. We often use humor to tell some serious stories. And this is not such a common approach in Vienna, I think. People often don't take our work very seriously because they think it's rather like a comedy show, and it is, but I think through comedy you can say some quite important things. In September we're going to have a project called Living Statues. So there are lots of statues around Vienna that we walk past every day, don't think about, and actually we should think about them, who the hell these people are, these generals on horses or these Kaisers or musicians. And so we're going to get actors and tour guides to dress up as Mozart, Sisi, Freud, and they are going to recreate the Vienna of that moment. So Michael Niavarani is going to be Franz Josef, Kaiser Franz Josef, and they're going to adopt the attitudes of that moment. So they're going to be, racist, sexist. We're going to remind people that actually the past was not quite as good as it seems to many people. But yeah, and we're going to ask these people about the future. And we know the future and they don't, so we're going to have some fun with somehow trying to bring the statues to life. So please come along in September. Yeah, next slide, please. Beyond cliches, we try to remix the city. That's our project. If you take away any message, it's that Vienna, we want to play with Vienna and tell some new stories and remix it a little bit. The cliches of Vienna are very well known. They sell very well around the world. But I'm not sure if it's very healthy for the city to always be looking backwards, and a hotel like this understands that, I think, and is able to play with it. Vienna Ugly, the project props that you've heard of from us, is a tour of the worst architecture in Vienna. That sounds like a really bad idea. Normally you seek out beauty, and we thought, well, everybody knows Vienna is beautiful. It's quite a familiar story. But how could we get the Viennese to walk around Vienna? And I'm sure you know that there's a dark soul, dark spirit of the city. So it appeals very much to the Viennese. If I organized a tour of Baroque gardens and palaces, you guys wouldn't come. If I invite you to the dark side, you come, right? Somehow people are interested in this celebration. We get lots of architects on the tour, and they come basically for Schadenfreude, to remind themselves that they are not the worst architect in Vienna. We go through quite hip neighborhoods, rich neighborhoods, because you could make an ugly tour of Simmering or Floridsdorf or Favoriten, but it wouldn't be very funny. It's much more funny to look at the bad taste of rich people, right? There are 8 travel journalists in Vienna for every news journalist. If you want to tell some news stories about Vienna, get a tourist connection to your project, because then you can tell lots of stories. That's basically how we got into New York Times, into Guardian, because we recognize that through travel journalists, you can tell lots more stories than you can with news journalists. News journalists are kind of overworked, and travel writers are often a bit bored, because everything they do is paid for. If you read the end of you read the newspapers, every page is terrible. You get to the travel pages, everywhere's great, everywhere, because everything is paid for. You have a look at the end of the article, it's all sponsored. So be skeptical about that, and therefore travel journalists don't have many news stories to tell, not so much about Vienna anyway, so we wanted to tell some news stories. Next slide. Beyond Sisi and Schnitzel. So this is the way in which I characterize the kind of tourists that most Viennese choose to avoid. It's a shame that there are so few forums in which visitors and locals come together. There are a few hotels that manage it, and something like the Lifeball manages it. But in general, it's quite difficult to get into the hip Vienna scene if you're here for a weekend. It's a shame, because people come away with the impression that Vienna's not very friendly. But actually, I think it's a failure to understand. We are all tourists as soon as we leave our hometown. We want to make friends. We want to have that kind of experiential travel, but we don't offer that opportunity to the tourists to Vienna. We just avoid them mostly. The big groups that ride around. The cliches of Vienna. If you go to Milan for the weekend, it might be for good fashion, design, football, food. You're going to meet the Italians because that's what they like. You go to Berlin for the weekend. It's for a wild party scene, for great new contemporary art and interesting architecture. You're going to meet lots of Berliners there. You come to Vienna for the weekend. You ride around in a fiacre. You take a selfie eating a Sachertorte in Schönbrunn. You go to a costumed concert where all the musicians are dressed as Mozart. You're not going to meet too many Viennese there. And that's a problem, that there's a distance between, for sure, there are many Viennese, there are many tourists on Opernplatz and Donaukanal, but unfortunately we don't speak to them so often. We're actually going to make a pub quiz of Austrian citizenship test. I don't know how many of you have ever read the Austrian citizenship test, but we're going to turn it into an Irish pub quiz, and we're going to find out how many Austrians pass the Austrian citizenship test, and how many of you, how many people like me, I remain a British citizen for now at least. Post-Brexit, I'm having to explain it quite a lot. So we're going to play with the whether the questions really are the questions that you Austrians think we need to know as foreigners. We're making a tour next weekend, a James Walk of the Donaukanal scene, the new scene along the Danube Canal, a free walk on Friday night if you want to come along and explore that scene. I love the fact that the Danube Canal has no barrier. You know, it's a cycle path with lots of drunk people. And there's no barrier. Somebody cycles into the Danube about once every 4 months, and you can have a look on YouTube. There's a couple of people who have done that. And they face this interesting dilemma of whether to rescue their bike or themselves. Which takes about 3 seconds to decide, you know. These hipsters with their proud bike, you know. There's quite a few bikes in the bottom of the Danube Canal. Next slide, please. Friday morning, 38% of the Viennese leave the city at the weekend for more than 5 hours. That is a catastrophe, right? Just as Berlin or London are coming alive, Vienna goes to sleep. And this is a very strange idea. I mean, it's partly because the countryside near here is world class. It is amazing, you know. But nevertheless, it's bad for the economy. If you earn money here and spend it in the Wachau or in Simmering, it's bad for Semmering, not Simmering. Please go and spend your money in Simmering. Or if you, you know, it's also bad for the ecology, because the places that people are going are usually little dwarfs, you know, and you have to drive there. But most of all, it's bad psychologically, you know. London is a 7 days a week city. Vienna is a 4.5 days a week city. It's quite difficult to get an answer on the telephone on a Friday afternoon, and that's problematic, you know, for the psychology to build communities, you know, that you walk along lots of streets on a Saturday afternoon. The shops are closed on Taborstrasse. Nearly all the shops are closed. What the fuck is that about, you know? So we try to encourage people to stay at the weekend. You know, it's the best part of the week. It's the time where you actually go out to hang out with friends, to go to theatre, you know, to do stuff. And yet, I think the soul of many, even people who are born in Vienna, is in the countryside somewhere. They dream of nature, of fresh air, of sport, of adventure, rather than having a true kind of urbanist adventure. Next slide, please. Beyond 1914, I'm sorry these slides are quite small. They were big on my computer, but I hope you can read that. 1914. We make a walk called the Tribes of the Danube Island. We're going to walk from the tippy top of the island to the bottom, 21 kilometers, and we're going to explore how different people, the Danube Island, the Donauinsel, was created in 1988, and it is where Vienna goes to play. And that's a really interesting space, how different tribes have made it their own. There is obviously there's a gay section, there is a sports and family section, there's the naked part, and we're going to get naked in the naked part, the whole group. And there's also a student naked drug part of the island at the top, which obviously we're going to visit, which is quite good fun. I recommend it. And we're also making a project called Whoosh, which is a adult playground where children will not be welcome on the far part of the Naschmarkt, beyond the car park, beyond the flea market, because Naschmarkt has become a little bit kitsch now. It's mainly focused on tourists. It's a bit expensive, really, at the Naschmarkt, but I find it like a missed opportunity to do a bit more. So we're going to build an adult playground. It's going to be quite dangerous, and we're going to open up a little bit of the Wien Fluss that goes underneath the Naschmarkt. We're going to have big swings and slides and lots of water, and there's a big tree there, and we're going to build a tree house. And in this tree house, we're going to have DJ parties and also storytelling after dark. Yeah, adults only storytelling. We're making a Russia walk. It's 100 years since the Russian Revolution in 1917, and we want to celebrate the Russian influence, the dialogue between Vienna and Russia. Many people have a rather negative impression of Russia right now, but the Orthodox Jews who live in my neighborhood around Karmelita Markt are Russians mostly, and also the Chechen refugees. But we're going to talk about the occupation of the city for 10 years after the Second World War, but also Ruskaya and vodka and Rotes Wien, ultimately. Many of the ideas which Vienna used so productively to make the social housing. But the thing I love most about Vienna is that poor people live well here. I think many of us as creatives recognize that that's a valuable thing. You know, increasingly the neighborhoods are getting squeezed in London and New York City because the rents are so high, and it's beautiful that all kinds of different people live together in Vienna and have an interesting dialogue. We're also doing a project, Gefilter Flak, which is, I loved Tarantino's film Inglourious Bastards, where he rewrites history, allowing Brad Pitt and his band of Jewish banditos to blow up Hitler in Paris. And a bad history, but great fun. And we're going to do something similar on top of the Haus des Meeres. I discovered that the Jewish food, the kosher food, which is eaten now in Vienna, is actually mostly Israeli food, Middle Eastern food, or Russian, Soviet-influenced food, reflecting the communities who are here now. And we want to bring back the original kosher food, which was destroyed by the Nazis. So the original kosher food of Central Europe, which you cannot really find in the city anymore. And we're going to cook it up on top of a Nazi tower, the Haus des Meers. So that's from Jewish New Year in September. Please come along every Saturday for 12 weeks. Beyond, next slide, please. Beyond the law. Part of the reason that the Vienna Ugly tour became a story in the press, I became associated with the Gewerbeordnung system. I got lost in the Kafkaesque bureaucracy of Vienna. My tours are basically illegal because I'm not a geprüfter Fremdenführer, a qualified tour guide. And I twice was sent a fine by the Marktamt, so the city of Vienna, for 380 euros, which I paid because I'm not really a tour guide. And you have to be to make a tour in Vienna. After the second fine, when the story hit lots of international newspapers about how the tour is about Vienna's dark side. It's about the problems of doing business in the city, about bad taste, and the city was trying to close it down, basically, by fining me. And so I saw this like an opportunity, and lots of journalists also saw it like an opportunity of a David and Goliath situation, where you try out something new and the city stamps on it, the Wirtschaftskammer Wien, basically. So after the second fine, because they were doing my marketing for me, they were telling my story around the world about how strange Vienna is, I asked them for a third fine. And they understood that I was playing with them, and they've stopped sending me fines now. And now whenever Christoph Leitl or anybody's on the TV, asked to talk about the Gewerbeordnung, they say, well, what about the Ugly Tour? What do you think about that? So, it's free marketing. The camera are not very good at media relations, let's say. Next slide. Beyond your head, dancing. I'm a DJ quite often in Vienna, and it's really quite a challenge to get a lot of Viennese people to dance. It's called dance music for a reason, and the music's really loud. People sit around all night drinking beer, nodding at each other. It's so loud that you can't even talk. So I'm not quite sure what the point of an evening in Elektrogörner is, but you go to some of the ethnic clubs in Vienna, and people really do dance. So it's a reason to go ethnic. But it's a shame. I have a theory that people in Vienna are overeducated. They got 2 or 3 degrees, and they live more in their heads than their bodies, which is a shame. So try just jumping around, shaking your ass tonight instead of heading for the countryside to be intellectual. Yeah, and by the way, with the Ugly Tour, even if we've been in dispute with the city in different ways, I got an email from Wolfgang Dvorak, who's the head of city planning, so the architecture department of Stadt Wien, with a list of 11 buildings which I must include on the tour. So the city of Vienna understood that we could start an interesting debate about what kind of city we want to live in. The point of the tour is to raise the game of architecture, that we learn from the past and don't make the same mistakes again. We talk about gentrification and all these shopping centers that are still being built in Vienna, which are basically big metal boxes with the names of all the brands on the outside. There's zero architecture going on there, and you think, well, how would that ever happen, that you end up with a shopping center where everybody knows now what shopping centers do to communities, that all these little mom and pop stores close and all the profits go abroad from a shopping center. It's not really about local industry at all. Next slide, please. Beyond profit, right? Yeah, so I was unemployed when I arrived. I was looking for work. I used to be a journalist for BBC World Service, and I wasn't really sure what I would do here. It is a big decision to walk away from your flat, your country, your language, your job, your friends. And yeah, so in this sense, I'm very pleased. Space and Place, our group was born 5 years ago today, which is a coincidence. Today, we began with a project in the Wien Museum, a social dining project where we tried to sit down Viennese who would never normally have dinner together. Old and young is a conversation that's not happening so much anymore. Right-wing people with left-wing people, different ethnic groups, and also people with less and more education. We wanted to open up some dialogues that normally don't happen. And here we are. I earned last year 32,000 euros. So you can go from nothing, there is hope. I made a talk last year called Fear and Fail, about all my failures, and it's kind of interesting to reflect on the mistakes you've made. But I do work quite a lot for free still. I make partnerships, and some of them just open doors. we had a beautiful opportunity with Österreich Werbung in New York City, who liked the idea of the coffee house conversations, of reflecting on the beautiful coffee house moment in the early 20th century. Many of the coffee houses in Vienna, I love them. I think they're one of the best things in the city, but a lot of them become kitsch now, a kind of coffee and cake industry. You know, they're focused on tourism. And to bring back that moment where Freud and Klimt and Schönberg were sitting down and networking and developing ideas, we wanted to do that. So Österreich Werbung heard that I was having lots of problems with different authorities in Vienna, and this woman said, Gabriela Wolf, she said, Eugene, if anybody ever closes a door on you because of institutional thinking, just tell me their name and their job title, and I'll call their boss and open that door again for you. And that's a wonderful feeling, where you think that there are folks out there who want it to work out and who recognize all of the difficulties of all the bureaucrats whose job it is to say no to you. You know, it's wonderful when you've got a few people who recognize you're doing some good work. Next slide, please. I think cool is overrated. I'm 49 years old now. I used to be obsessed with being cool, but you can tell now that I'm probably not. I think it's cool is increasingly driven by PR and marketing. You know, it's not actually real stuff, music or fashion or a lot of this kind of hype. Bye-bye, you three. Yeah, they're too cool. They're outraged. Hang on, he's not into cool, this guy. Yeah, I'm going home. You know, I think it's, I mean, Vienna's not very cool. I moved from London to Vienna. London is widely understood to be a cool city, and Vienna's not really. But there's lots of cool stuff in Vienna. It's just that the city doesn't really present it so well to the world. I love FM4. I love Impact Hub. I love Magdas Hotel. I love Hotel Altstadt as well. You know, there's loads of interesting. The Donau Canal scene. How many people read about that around the world? Unfortunately, you know, it doesn't quite correspond with the stories that people want. You know, there's a kind of binary idea of what Vienna means, and it's not things like Donau Canal or Museumsquartier at night time. But I love those things. Yeah. We used the Eurovision Song Contest. We created Vienna Ugly for the Eurovision Song Contest, understanding that, number one, Conchita is breaking the rules of being a transvestite by having a beard and still looking quite hot as a girl, even with the beard. And also that Eurovision just brings lots and lots of bad singing, bad dancing, bad music, bad costumes, bad national representation. We thought, well, how can we creatively respond with some bad taste of our own? So in that sense, you can use uncool events. Maybe Eurovision is not something we'll be interested in other years, but when it comes to Vienna, you think, well, there's 1,600 journalists coming, lots of young bloggers, lots of gay people are coming to tell some new stories about the city. Let's not give them sissy and schnitzel. Let's give them something a bit more contemporary. Next, please. In Britain, every year, there's a prize given out for the worst use of language in a public document, the most ridiculous, pretentious academic language. The average published academic paper is read by 6 people. And that's partly because academics choose to self-ghettoize with a language which so few people understand. You know, if public money finances your project, you should talk in a language that people might understand, because your research will go further. But unfortunately, so many of the great art galleries in Vienna, the museums, still use that language, which means it's elitist. It's a big fuck you to the ordinary people. You know, to make ideas democratic is to release them, to make them free. And it's a shame that so many people feel the need to use big words on their websites. Please, please reduce your ideas so that everybody understands them, because otherwise it's just disrespectful to many people, including migrants who don't understand it. We make fun of the language of architecture on the Vienna Ugly tour. And you can see the architects very uncomfortable, thinking, you know what, we use that language, but it's really bad marketing. If only 5% of the people who are reading understand what you're talking about, then it hasn't really worked in communication. Next slide. Beyond cars, I don't know how to drive. I don't fly either. I am very much into ecology. And there was a walking conference, came to Vienna 2 years ago, Walk 21, a year of walking. And not many cities are brave enough ever to have a year of walking, because people consider it a slightly unnecessary thing to celebrate. But walking is really at the heart of creativity. I made a TED talk about the fact that there's lots of artists have used walking in really interesting ways to get away from your computer and actually just go deeper into your ideas, to reflect on what you want to say and how you want to say it. I walk home from movies and think about it, and you notice that people, when they get on the U-Bahn now, they're immediately dicking around on Facebook, Instagram, you know, obsessed with all these likes that don't really matter in the end. We made a project for Vienna Linien. We didn't make a project for Vienna Linien. I presented to the management board of Vienna Linien. There are 26 first languages spoken by the drivers in Vienna, of the buses, the trams, and the U-Bahn. Nobody knows that. The announcements are recorded. And I said, well, why don't you celebrate the fact that you've got, that Vienna's run by people from all over the world, have come here to make a new career, a new home. And so the idea was that on UNESCO Day of Mother Tongues, which is the 21st of February, why don't you get those drivers to say auf Deutsch, Guten Tag, ich heiße Juri, ich komme ursprünglich aus der Ukraine und ich will euch auf meiner Muttersprache grüßen an der Welttag, der UNESCO Tag der Muttersprache. And then he would say, I don't know, does anybody speak Ukrainian? Dobry utro, whatever it is, Dzień dobry. And then he would say to the passengers, you know what, why don't you say good morning in your dialect or your home language? So it was just a kind of spontaneous thing on that morning. And Vienna Linien said no. They said no because, one, the unions will never allow it. Number two, the drivers might crash their trams or their U-Bahn if they were too much concentrated on the message. Number three, some passengers in Vienna don't want the driver to say good morning to them, which is possible, unfortunately. And number four, you can't force the drivers to say good morning. I don't think you'd need to force the drivers to say good morning in Portuguese or Swedish or wherever they come from. But, that's the kind of institutional thinking you're up against. And so I like to talk about that now. And we're bringing the project to Cologne instead. They got it and said yes immediately because they're not so scared of risks, of having some fun. Next slide, please. Beyond visual, we do a talk called Smells Like Wien Spirit. For some reason, you have to be over 30 to get that joke. smells like Wien Spirit, yeah. Maybe over 40. It sounds like there's 3 people laughing. Everybody tours visual stuff. They're all looking for beautiful visual stuff, and actually we wanted to tour the smells of the city. We visit 16 good smells and 4 bad smells of Vienna. We ride on the U6, and there's supposed to be something called Chanel number U6, which is a combination of kebabs, marijuana, vodka, ex-vodka, like somebody drank yesterday, and urine. And unfortunately, we've never been able to find this Chanel number U6. It's basically a snobby judgment about poor people and where they ride in Vienna. But we also visit lots of good smells, and we wanted to approach the city like dogs do, basically. Yeah. We go beyond the cliches of Vienna out to the west of the city, to Manor, to the Meinl coffee roasting plant, to the Ottakringer Brauerei, to the Brunnenmarkt. We also visit a public toilet, and we visit the Rose Garden in the Volksgarten, and the Fiakers, of course. Beyond the visual is beyond young as well. I'm not so young anymore, and I think that creativity, many great writers are associated with youth, but unfortunately I'm not young, but I think it's still possible to be creative. Next headline, please. We made a series called How to Be Austrian. That was a series of 1-minute films for Ö1 radio station, where we, instead of asking, after the wave of migration that came in, the refugees 2 years ago, we thought it'd be more fun to ask foreigners how to be Austrian than to ask the locals. So we asked Griesemann and Dirk Stermann and lots of refugees and people from all over the world, lots of musicians who live here for a while. The series was in German to ask them how to be Austrian, how to flirt, how to smoke, how to shop, how to dance, how to talk, how to cook. And we had a bit of fun. It was meant to be a humorous project, but also with a serious intent, because there is so much angst out there about change and cultural diversity. And we wanted to show that migrants who've been here for 10 years know exactly where they are. They're really engaged with the process of, who is Austrian, what it means to be Austrian, how to fit in. They're available on YouTube if you want to have a look at those. Next, please. Beyond the Gürtel. If you want to get funding from the city of Vienna, go beyond the Gürtel. There's far, far too much culture in Neubau, in Leopoldstadt, and there's very, very little going on in Simmering, in Floridsdorf, in Favoriten. A bit more in Favoriten. But, really, it's a shame that a neighborhood like this is super served, and there's so much people who are not getting enough culture, music ideas. We made an umbrellas project. We hung up 300 umbrellas on The first year it was, and of course it rained on the day that we opened it. We invited some press, and it rained on all our umbrellas. They were hanging up about 4 meters high, so quite high up in the sky. It's kind of fun. And the first year, we called it a rainforest. There were some red umbrellas and mainly green umbrellas. And the Reds who'd financed it, the Stadt Wien, were quite upset. They said, well, how come there's more green umbrellas than red umbrellas? So the next year we went for a rainbow color instead. So we used rainforest rainbow, a kind of theme of, and it didn't rain the second year when we went for it. Next, please. Smartphones. I don't have a smartphone. I've got a deeply dumb phone. I mentioned it already. I think that you really need to take time away from constantly dicking around online. It seems exciting, you know, it's quite stimulating, but it's not very productive in the end. So please get lost sometimes. Don't always use the map in your telephone. Sometimes just walk and see what you find. Umbrellas. Yeah, bewegende Geschichten. Yeah, we made the first ever bus tour of Meidling. We made a bus tour of Hernals with local people. Instead of having real tour guides, we got 4 people who would never normally speak to each other to show us their neighborhood and to open up some debate and some disputes. It was a free bus tour, also financed by Wien Kultur. So we wanted to, every neighborhood's interesting if you get insider details. If someone says, let me show you a few secrets. So, you know, there's so many cliches in Vienna, and there's not enough exploration of some of the quieter neighborhoods. How long have I got, Harold? You're about 10 minutes over. You told me you were going to warn me with 2 minutes to go. Okay. 3 people already walked out anyway. Yeah, feel free to go if you got to work. Any of you? Nobody's left. Yeah. Next slide, please. Smartphones, just to finish that off. It's partly about friendship, you know? If people sit in front of me and they're dicking around, constantly checking their messages, you know, I don't do that. I think it's really quite odd that people aren't really present in the moment. It's really important to listen and to create interesting dialogue. I read now that in America there's a rule that if there are 6 people sitting at a table, 3 heads can go down, no more than 3. You know, to check your messages. So if somebody looks up, then that's your opportunity to go down, you know? But there needs to be 3 heads up. So if you're visiting America, that's a new cultural code. Terrifying, isn't it? Beyond, next slide, please. Beyond conventional, our events have no end time. We don't put any end time on it because the most important part also of a creative morning is when you're just standing around and you meet some random person who maybe doesn't work in your industry. It's really a shame that so many people at the end of an event, they just go home. You know, at the end of a film or a piece of theatre, they just got another project, or they want to get on the U-Bahn, because that's really when you want to reflect on what you just heard and the stimulation, the ideas of it. You know, a film or whatever, or even a meal. You know, it's a shame that so many people don't think that could be a really interesting time. So we definitely want to create some new conversations. We did a comedy show about Britain's ridiculous relationship with the European Union. Chris Cummins, FM4 DJ, and me talking about why it is that Britain is leaving the European Union, which is really illogical and stupid. I can tell you part of the reason is that 83% of British newspapers were pro-Brexit. Yeah, the BBC and Guardian were definitely not, but they were fighting against the cause, and it's embarrassing. You know, it's totally retro idea that you disengage from international, you know, possibilities and dialogue. But it's those newspapers, those 5 owners of those 5 newspapers, which sell so many copies in the UK. 4 of them don't live in Britain. I don't think that's possible in Austria. I think that you have to live here to own a newspaper, but it's a different atmosphere for sure at home. Beyond your home. Next slide. Sorry. Yeah. Beyond your home. Please walk around more. We don't have an office, and we use. Sorry to. The whole city is my office, and it's problematic for many people that I have meetings in coffee houses or in the park or in. You know, in my bedroom sometimes, or you know, wherever I think about meeting people, and it's kind of unfocused. People expect you to really belong to a place, but I love the fact that I'm forced every day to be in a new room and talking to different people. So consider being a bit more mobile and having fewer meetings in your shared space. Beyond your home. Street capital is an interesting idea. I went for a walk with the journalist from Der Standard. We were trying to talk about walking and how you could make it into a story. So we walked from the Karmelitermarkt to the Victor Adler Markt in Favoriten, which is a walk that nobody ever makes, and we compared the street life in different neighborhoods. And around Karmelitermarkt, it's more or less boring. Because the bobos and hipsters live there and they're quite busy. But you get into the central part of Vienna. The Karmelitermarkt is only open for 12 hours a week. So, you know, the rest of the time. And it opens at 6 a.m. and closes at midday. You know, what the fuck? 6 a.m. in January. They have no customers at all, but it suits the farmers, the rhythm of the farmers who come there. So, and then they close at 12, just when everyone's waking up and in the mood to go out for some coffee. It's illogical opening times in Vienna. So then we walk through the center of the city, through the tourist zone, which is always full of people, 24 hours a day. Really good fun. People from all over the world. It's quite interesting to watch how they use the street differently. The kind of street theater, you know, it's not called a catwalk for nothing. People can really enjoy walking if you see the Italians walking or some of the Americans. And then we walked down past the Funkhaus, Argentinierstraße. Nobody around at all, kind of boring streets. And then we got to the Hauptbahnhof, always full of people. And then down Favoritenstraße, and that is pure theatre. You know, migrants use social space completely differently, much more theatrically, much more fun. There's 100 people just hanging out, flirting, eating, texting, drinking, singing, doing whatever. And I call that street capital, the sense of street theatre, that some streets are full of life and entertainment and passion and people. I don't want to talk anymore because I'm nearly there. Beyond melancholy, yeah, please, we've got a campaign of rebellious optimism that, you know, we live in the city with the highest quality of life in the world, and the Viennese really don't believe that they do live in the city with the highest quality of life in the world. You know, people vote for the FPÖ, they love to complain, and I find it extremely destructive. Time Out magazine in London is a kind of cheerleader for the new London. It's always looking for the latest food, street fashion, you know, digital culture, trying to group bands together in interesting music scenes. And Falter, great newspaper, I read it all the time, but it spends the first 15 pages kicking Vienna in the face, you know, about corruption and Nazis and bureaucracy, and it's quite destructive in a way. It's only after that that they get to culture and ideas. You know, they've got 1 page for new music and new books, you know, but they've got 20 pages for ex-Nazis and all that stuff, and it's you know, it's quite inapproachable for visitors to Vienna. Falter is quite difficult to negotiate. You know, you can't find which band to go see tonight because not only is it in German, but it's visually not very attractive to flick through. Yeah, we do a tour about why Vienna's got the highest quality of life in the world, celebrating the city, and yeah, we start tours at midnight, quite a lot of our tours. So please, you know, I think it's a shame that all the tours begin in the morning. So please come on some of our walks. Please like us on Facebook. We are Space and Place, and yeah, we want to tell some new stories, to play with Vienna, to remix it, and to open up some new dialogue. For sure, the city often seems to be looking backwards, but we should be looking forwards. Could you flick through all the slides? Just go to the end. There. That one. Yeah, just that's my contact details. Please send me an email if you'd like to work with us. Incognito, for sure. It's on your website, Eugene Quinn. It's easy to find me online. Vienna Ugly. I'd love to hear from you, and yeah, to maybe think about the ways in which we might be able to work together. And please join our walks. They only cost €5, and we're doing 10 free walks in June as part of the Wir sind Wien Fest. Another beautiful free culture moment. There's so much free culture in Vienna. Enjoy it, because it's not the case in Italy and Britain, in France. Definitely is here. Thank you.